Welcome everyone to our Jewish Matters podcast. Tonight we are in our Jewish spirituality series, and we're starting a new series. We'll be talking about finding our life purpose. I was going to begin this discussion talking about J.K. Rowling, who was 29 years old. You might know the story. Single mom and broke, and she had an idea. She had a vision. She had something that was inside of her that she needed and wanted to write. And so she started writing, even though she had no money. She had a child, and she wrote this book, sent it out to 12 publishers. None of the major publishers picked it up. Finally, Bloomsbury Publishers, a relatively minor one, picked it up, printed 1,000 copies, 500 went to the library. But she didn't give up, and she kept pushing forward. It was picked up by an American publisher that gave her $100,000, and that kind of launched her, and the rest is history. She wound up writing the Harry Potter series. And the reason I was not going to speak about her is because, in a sense, she's like one in a million, right? We feel like, how can I relate to her? You know, she found this life purpose which touched hundreds of millions of people and got children to read. Our daughter's a much better reader because of it. Inspired them in their imaginations and countless other things. So let's talk about a more mundane person. Chaim Leibowitz, the shoe salesman. And on the side, he would help people with medical referrals. People who are having medical problems, find the right doctors for them. And he was connected to a Dr. Shmuel Shoham in Johns Hopkins. So when the coronavirus broke out, and Dr. Shoham realized that the Orthodox community, and in Rockland County, there's a particularly big one, since they were hit with a higher incidence of coronavirus, and since they're a community that's inclined to do public service, he reached out to Chaim Leibowitz, the shoe salesman, said, do you know anyone who could donate antibodies? And Chaim mobilized, said, not only will I donate, but I'll get my friends to donate. And from mid-March to mid-April, he spent 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, yes, with his phone on Shabbat, saving lives, through Passover, barely had a Seder with his family, and 11,000 people, 11,000 particularly Orthodox Jews, wound up donating antibodies to help treat others. And here's the example of someone, you say, can one person make a difference? Imagine all the lives that were touched and perhaps saved from all of those antibody donations. And here a shoe salesman who decides, I'm going to make this my mission, my purpose. So the question is, how do we find our purpose? So the famous philosopher Yogi Berra said that if you don't know where you're going, you won't get there. By the way, he was a coach for the Mets in the 1970s. Not a famous philosopher, but he had some very good life lessons to teach. And on the upside, not only figuring out where we're going to go, but if we do figure out our purpose, then our lives will be directed, they'll be energized, and we'll talk about, how important this is in our lives. Because famous psychologist, Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he developed an entire school of psychology based on the fact that people need meaning in our lives. And if we don't have meaning, we easily fall into depression and into psychological issues. So we have to have meaning and purpose. So how do we find it? And without it, we feel blah. The days just kind of go by. He says we go between anxiety and boredom, perhaps depression. And the problem is, if we don't have a sense of our purpose, the Greek philosopher Seneca said, when a man doesn't know what harbor he is making for, no wind is the right wind. Okay, when we don't know what harbor we're going for, no wind is the right wind. So one of the reasons this is so difficult is because, frankly, we get sidetracked. We think we have a purpose, and by the way, money is not a purpose in life, okay? But we do have to earn a living, and next week we'll talk about that trade-off, dilemma, paradox, okay? But society gives us a lot of messages. Society tells us we need to be successful, okay, whatever that means. And family often gives us messages, right? The joke used to be, become a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, right? So some families will give people a message of, you need to do this, you need to accomplish that, you need to arrive here. And then there's social status, right? When I was in college, I rushed fraternities. Yes, I did. The tell-all here. And I didn't get into the cool one, so the non-cool one that accepted me, I blew them off because I thought I was cooler than them, right? So social status will often influence our decisions. And the problem is that we've lots of voices telling us what we should do. And if we listen to those voices, so we might get ahead, we might find a path, but is it really ours? Is it really who we are? Is it really what gives us a sense of meaning and purpose and mission? So that is the problem. And so I give my parents a lot of credit that they never told me, become this, do that, achieve this. The message was always, find the thing that you want to do, find the thing that you're good at, and go for it. And I guess that's how I became a rabbi, but that's another story. Actually, it's very interesting because already in high school, so many people had this path, someone to become doctors, some were good at math, were probably going to finance, and I was already worrying about it, so I took an aptitude test. And the aptitude test said, top ranking was lawyer, and sure enough, I had better verbal language skills than science and math skills, not surprising. The second one was clergy. And I said to myself, I'm not going to become a minister or a priest. Rabbi wasn't even in the vying. And just kind of put it in the recesses of my mind, only to have it come up a number of years later. So, so what did I do? So when I went to college, I took liberal arts to really try and figure out, and here's where the search begins, right? If we don't know what our purpose is, so we have to look, we have to search, we have to question. And I would change my major every 3 months. First, I thought it'd be psychology. I want to understand human nature. Then maybe it's literature. I want to see the experiences of human nature. Anthropology, I want to understand human societies. History, I want to understand the human past of mankind in order to understand the present. And even philosophy, I want to understand ideas, and hoping that philosophy would lead me to this question of, what do I do with my life? How do I make a meaningful impact? And after 2 years, it was very intellectually stimulating, but didn't bring me any closer, and so I left. I took off a year. And that's why a lot of people do a gap year or do a year abroad. It's a part of this process of finding out, who am I, of finding ourselves. And this story of finding ourselves is really the story of the first Jew, the story of Avraham Avinu. And we're introduced to him, and God says to him, Lech lecha, me'artzecha, moladcha, beit avicha. Go from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house. Now, what's very strange about this is, if you were going to leave, first you'd walk out of your house. Then would you walk out of your town, then you'd walk out of your country. But actually, the Torah presents it in the opposite order. First leave your land, then your town, your birthplace, and then your father's house. Why? So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a very powerful insight. He says that our society has a strong impact on us. Gives us a lot of messages about what we should be doing. Even stronger is our community. Our community has a social pressure. Even stronger is our family, the people we have our closest ties to. So Avram had to first leave societal values, then even harder his community, and then even harder the values of his family. But he'd already begun questioning. He'd already begun asking himself, what is the world? What is my place in it? Is there a God? Is there something more? And so really the beginning of Judaism is the beginning of this story of a personal journey. And that's what we're being told. We're being told that being a Jew is embarking on this personal journey of finding out, and the way the Torah formulates it is really, how do I serve the Almighty? You see, when it's about us, so who am I? How do I actualize myself? It becomes very self-focused. But the Torah turns it around and says, what is my purpose? What is my God's mission? What is my God's journey? And the problem for Abraham was, God said, to the land I will show you. He told him to leave, but he didn't tell him where he was going. And this has a powerful message as well, which is that why is it so difficult to embark on this kind of journey? Why is it so difficult to find ourselves? So one of the reasons is because it's scary. The unknown is scary. We'd rather be told what to do. And so the known, which is unsatisfying, is better to me than the unknown, which might be more satisfying, but it's too big a chance. It's too scary to try and figure that out, to break away and to pursue it. So how do we find it? So how did Abraham go on to find it? So the first thing the Torah says to Abraham is Lech Lecha, which literally means, and the Zohar understands it this way, go to yourself. In other words, in order to find your purpose and your mission, you have to turn inwards, even before you turn outwards. We have to know ourselves, and we have to be in touch with our inner intuition, our inner voice, which is telling us where that journey should go. And from the Torah's perspective, that inner voice comes from our divine soul. So getting in touch with our divinity, with our inner self, with the recesses of our soul, is the first step to trying to figure this out. Now, the next thing is that another way to look at it is think about however many years from now, God willing, we say till 120, when I look back on my life, what do I want to feel about what I have done with my life? So if it's, I want to have had a good time, made a lot of money, traveled the world, and had pleasure, so maybe that is our goal. Maybe that is what we want. But if there's something greater, if there's something beyond ourselves, that's one way to try and get in touch with it. Another one is, say to ourselves, is there anything I would be ready to die for? Any mission? Any person? And often people feel like that I'd be ready to die for my family, for my children, for my wife. Well, that might be an indication of something important that we should be finding as a part of our mission in life. And then beyond that, the Jewish people, freedoms, my own freedom, someone else's freedom. These are all tough questions, especially given the current events going on today in the United States. The other tricky thing is that maybe it's not one thing. When people want an epiphany, I want to become a classical pianist. I want to be a peace worker in Africa. And they're not finding that calling. So maybe it's not one thing. Maybe it's a amalgam of different values that I integrate into my life and that I'm passionate about pursuing and that give me meaning and purpose. So that's another way to understand it. And if we go into ourselves, it means we have got, the first step is we have to know ourselves. And if you look at Abraham, if you look at his mission, the next scene we're introduced to him in the next parsha is him bringing guests into his tent. Abraham's quality was chesed, it was giving, and so his mission was to give to others to help them understand their place and the place of his belief of a higher being in this world. So Abraham, it was knowing his qualities and living the strengths that we have. That's one indication of it. Okay. Another indication is actually just the opposite. And the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, says that we're sent into this world. When we're sent into this world, we have a yehud, we have a purpose, we have a mission to fulfill in this world. Now, our society views it as a very external mission. Change the world, better the world. And the Torah has that value as well, of tikkun olam. But, and we want to better the world to bring it towards the Messiah, towards its perfection, to bring godliness into the world. But there's also an idea that the perfection starts within as well. The journey starts within. And he says particularly the issues which are the most challenging for us might at the same time be part of our purpose, which we're meant to confront, overcome, and then move beyond. So Avram's quality was givingness. He had to learn to be tough. He had to learn that his son Ishmael was a bad influence on Isaac. He had to learn that Ishmael might derail the entire family and its values. And he had to send Ishmael out of the home. So Abraham had to learn the quality that went against who he was. His weakness, he had to confront and deal with it. So that's another way of understanding the internal purpose which we have to find. And so we view, and the Torah tells us, that our mission is an external one, some people say vertical, and an internal one, some people call that the horizontal. Sorry, the vertical one, and the external one impacting the world is the horizontal one. Now, in terms of finding our inner passion, our inner message, so there's a very interesting idea in Kabbalah. This comes from the Nefesh Chaim. My teacher, Rabbi Yaakov Haber, shared this with us. And there's an idea that the highest level of the spiritual worlds is the Keter, the crown. And the highest level of the crown is Machshava, is thought, the most abstract, divine element of our being. And the highest level of that is called Ratzon. It's the will. The divine will, creating the world, and our personal individual will. Now, if we look at our lives and we say, okay, I get up, I go to work. Why? Well, I need to make money. Why? Because I need to eat. Why? So I need to then have energy. Why? So I need to do what I'm going to do in life. What is that? And if we keep going back and saying, why? What is where is that coming from? What is the inner motivation of why I live my life? Why I get up every day? And keep going back and going back and going back. That's when we start to get to the inner recess of our soul, to find that place of ratzon, that inner will. And sometimes, it's not so deep. Sometimes it's, okay, well, I just want to, as I said before, I want some excitement in my life. But then ask ourselves, the question we mentioned before, after 120 years, if I had all these exciting experiences, will I look back on that and say, wow, I really achieved something in my life? Or will I say, it's been a great run, and that's the most I could make of it? So we have to ask ourselves that. Because more often than not, and Viktor Frankl emphasizes this, and the Torah tells us this, that the most meaningful experiences are not what we get. The most meaningful experiences are what we give. Right? People, they're, on our stone we don't put, successful banker, even great doctor, right? Might have saved lives. We put spouse, parent. So the people who we're giving to are the ones who we recognize after that time are the ones who are important to us. That was the part of our mission that was the most meaningful. Or do we just put it up there because that's the convention? Maybe that's why people put it up there. But we have to ask ourselves that. What is my ratzon? What is my will? Okay? Even that shouldn't be a convention. Okay? Something that just is done because it is done. So, how do we get to this? How do we find it? Not easy. One way is brainstorming. Right? We do this at work. Take a piece of paper and just write down whatever comes to mind, right? What is my life purpose? Well, I like to play the piano. Maybe I should become a concert pianist. I like, volunteering. Maybe that's my purpose. I find stimulation in studying and learning Torah. Maybe that's my purpose. Okay? And next week we'll discuss this dichotomy, this dilemma of, does our purpose have to be our profession, right? And the Torah's view is the two don't necessarily have to align, okay? It could be certainly something outside of that, although I know people who have asked these questions and changed their professional lives, okay? A good quote for you here, which I wanted to share. This is George Eliot, who said, "It's never too late to be who you might have been." Okay? It's never too late to be who you might have been. And so, let's call her Cheryl, was working in a successful job, investment banking, earning well, living the life, and she realized this is not fulfilling me. And so she quit her job, enrolled in social work school, spent 2 years in social work school, first had to take prerequisites, a couple of years in school, field experience, and a number of years later she was helping elderly, running group sessions for them, visiting the elderly, connecting them with social services, and she was so much more fulfilled having found this life of meaning and purpose. And so it is possible. One can do it. It's never too late. I taught for 6 years in a rabbinic school, and the vast majority of the students there were second professions, people in their 30s and 40s who realized, okay, I've done the run, I've been successful, I want to now do something else with my life before, in a sense, it's too late, so to speak. So, and from a personal note, having made Aliyah 2 years ago and moved to Israel, it was a similar thing. It was that there's another step to be taken. There's more, there's further I can go. And so we moved here. And it's never too late to shake up one's life, to constantly be asking, what direction do I want to be in? What is meaningful for me? What gives me sense of purpose? So these are all the questions which we need to be asking ourselves. And so I'd like to share a story, a parable, if you will. The story is called Panning for Gold. And it's a story about finding one's purpose in life. So there was a young man who lived in a town, and he was frustrated. And so he was asking himself, how do I find my purpose? So he asked himself, he thought, you know what, there's this old wise man, I'm going to go to him. and I'm going to ask him. So he went off, he found him, and he found him amongst those people who were panning for gold. And the guy said, okay, I'll talk to you. And he said, I heard you have a lot of wisdom. Would you speak to me? He said, yes. So he said, let me tell you something. You see the people panning for gold here, he said, there are 3 types of people. He said, there are those who strike gold right away, who find what they need, they're excited, they take it, and then cash in, and they live comfortably the rest of their lives. They just coast the rest of their lives. There are those who pan for years. They know that the gold is here. They keep trying, they keep seeking, and they persist until they find what they're searching for. And he said, the young man said, and what's the 3rd type? So he said, the 3rd type are those who try to find the gold, they don't find it, and after a short while they get frustrated and they stop looking. And so he says that the first person who finds their purpose and then just coasts the rest of their lives, okay, that's not the goal. The second group of people who are the ones who persist and who work hard and who keep seeking it. And if you persist, he said to the young man, you will find it. It might not be right away. It might not be the way you expect it. But he said, part of the purpose and mission is the seeking. And remember that as well. Never forget that part of the mission is the seeking. And that's the way we view Torah study. It's a constant, ongoing endeavor. And we gather wisdom in order to apply it, but we never know when we're going to apply it. So we always have to be seeking, we always have to be asking ourselves, we always have to be seeking that purpose. And the 3rd category says, be very careful, because don't give up, because if you do, then you're going to be a very unhappy person. So we hope that these insights have helped us to ask ourselves some of the questions of, where is my purpose? How do I try and find it? We talked about not having other people dictate for us our life's purpose, but being an independent individual and asking the questions to ourselves, even if it means breaking away from society, community, or even family. We talked about, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't turn to those 3 places to try and find it, okay? We talked about the dangers of pursuing the wrong mission or purpose. We talked about turning inward to find one's purpose, as well as turning outward to look at what we can impact and do in the world. And we talked about Avraham, the first Jew, who really was on a mission and on a journey, and that we're all on journeys to find our purpose and our mission. Even when we think we found it, we've never found it. It's still ongoing. And we talked about Viktor Frankl, who tells us that finding that meaning is one of the most crucial things we can do in our lives, because that's the purpose that we live for. That's what will invigorate us and energize us in life to move forward and to live an energized, fulfilled life. And so after 120 years, we can look back and say to ourselves, I lived out my purpose. I actualized my potential. I became who I wanted to become and impacted the world in that way. Have a good evening, everyone. Next week, we will be talking about part 2 of finding our purpose. We'll be talking about career counseling and life purpose. Wednesday is the exceptional Jewish personalities, and we'll be talking about Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, the singing rabbi, and join us for that as well. Have a good evening, everyone. On the Jewish Matters podcast, you can find all of these talks on Spotify, Apple, or Google.